Well, hello everyone. We are so excited to have this conversation. I know I say that all the time, but I literally meet great human beings all the time who are doing incredible work in our communities. And what I've recognized is that most of them have had really challenging lives or life experiences. And so I was really captivated by Dr. Andrea's life experience and just her tenacity and her resiliency to see change and really create that in everything that's doing, both, in the lives of others, but really internally too. And so, her background is that she grew up in Chicago's South Side. She's a daughter of a Mexican immigrant and earned her PhD in clinical child psychology. She is trained at Boys Town. She's taught for 9 years. And now she helps treat anxiety and other things through BrightSpot Families. So Dr. Dre, not the rapper, although I'm pretty sure she can do this too. I'm so glad. If you don't mind, can you kind of walk us through what got you into this work?
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me. So the my origin story is I grew up, as you mentioned, Candace. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I grew up into a Mexican American family. So my dad immigrated here when he was 22. He met my mom, who was the girl next door. They had three boys, and then
Mm.
7 years later, they were blessed with me. And then they called me Andy, which was really weird. But anyways, and then now my friends call me Dre. And then we were close knit family, sarcastic. Fourth of July parties would look like 75 Mexicans in our front yard, just having a cookout, having cake fights, having water fights. It got a little bit crazy sometimes. I still have scars on my thumb from one of the water fights when I was a kid. But what happened when I was 11 years old was that our family got completely rocked. And that's because one of my brothers, the youngest of the three boys, Cisco, was murdered by someone who he considered a friend. And it completely changed our lives, as you can imagine. And we didn't know what to do. What we did was we kind of came together as a family. And I remember 2 years later, going through the court proceedings and all of that. My parents protected my brothers and I from all of that. And 2 years later, when we were going through sentencing, I was asked to write what's called an impact statement, a victim impact statement. So, talking about how the choices and the behaviors of the murderer impacted my life. And so, I remember at the age of 13, I stepped into the witness stand
Mm.
and I stared at the man who, murdered my best friend. And I told him how his actions, how his behaviors impacted my life. And he didn't look at me at all. He just put his head down for the whole entire time. And then when we recessed and then we were delivering the sentencing, or the judge was delivering the sentencing, he looked at my parents and I, because my older two brothers weren't allowed in the courtroom because they did not trust themselves not to inflict harm onto the person who murdered their younger brother. And the judge looked at my parents and I, and he took a big breath and he said, "I'm not sentencing this man to death, not because of moral or professional objections against the death penalty, but because he had a rough childhood." And I remember sitting there when I was 13 years old and being like, wait, a rough childhood is an explanation for his behavior. And so from there on, I became a clinical child psychologist who specializes in the treatment of antisocial and aggressive behavior so that other kids don't have, because of their rough childhood, don't become murderers. An 11-year-old girl doesn't lose her best friend because someone else had a rough childhood.
Oh my gosh, that is so. I mean, there's so sure those that are watching can even feel that. Like I had chills just in my whole body thinking about this little girl just seeing the human on the other side through such a hard experience because that takes a
Mhm.
depth within yourself to be able to do that because I don't have that lived experience of loss. And I know I've told you about, working in the prison system briefly.
Mhm.
It was really challenging because you see the other, you see the human within the circumstance
Mhm.
and we don't even know their circumstance. Can't imagine being in your shoes.
Mhm.
All of this has really impacted the way that you help clients and your patients really see a different opportunity forward.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that I love doing is working with like those lower income families that struggle, and it gives them an opportunity to see that there's another way to live than the way that they've been raised in. There's a better way. There's a way that they can thrive and that can succeed, and that they haven't experienced it before. But just because they haven't experienced it before doesn't mean that it's not within their reach if they make some, better choices.
Wow. And I know you talk about Gen Z all the time in your work too. And how do you feel that you've grown a deeper level of compassion for understanding the younger generations in the work that you've done over the years? I mean, you've worked with Boys Town, you've been an educator for a while. So kind of walk us through why that's so important to you.
Yeah, so I think kind of taking it from, so not everyone that I work with is, antisocial and aggressive. But those are, they have a special place in my heart. And what we're seeing a lot now is just a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression and a lot of people that don't think or think that things should be handed to them. And I remember as a college professor for 9 years, I just saw, like, the entitlement and the enabling of parents more and more and more, where parents are calling me and they're calling the professor because their kids are not doing well. Their college students are not doing well, and I know a recent study just came out of like over 1,000 managers in the workplace, and what they found was that 10% of the managers have received a phone call from their employee's parent after the manager gave their child, the adult, the young adult, not even a child, gave the adult some feedback.
Wow. What do you think is causing the inability to process that kind of information? Because, like, feedback, while it's hard sometimes to hear where maybe there's inadequacies or growth potentials, we do have the ability to see it as such. Do you think it's the delivery? Do you think it's the lack of preparation? Like, what is it?
I don't think, I mean, could it be the managers not, knowing the best way to deliver feedback? Yes, because we've been taught like the sandwich technique. And I'm like, get rid of the sandwich technique. Like, just be kind and honest. Like, be honest, be kind, and teach people what they need to be doing. Don't just belittle them, don't criticize them. Like, tell them, okay, you did this incorrectly, now this is how, like, let's figure out together how we're going to improve. So I think managers probably could be doing that better. But I think the big thing is, and what I've been talking a lot about over the probably the last 2 years, is this gentle parenting movement. So for the last like 20 years, instead of we've been put like this parenting technique called gentle parenting has been pushed. And so it's like, okay, we're going to emphasize emotions over thoughts and behaviors, even though emotions are the one thing we have absolutely no control over. We're going to get rid of rewards and punishments, which absolutely makes no sense whatsoever because it's the number one way to modify behavior. And then the last one is we're going to treat our children as if they are our equals, and we're going to treat them as if they're our partners. And it doesn't work. And we're starting to see in our Gen Z adults now, we're starting to see that they lack adaptability, they lack resiliency, they are entitled, they think that they can't communicate, they don't communicate very well, and they want their parents to solve everything for them. And so I think that's what we're kind of what's coming out of, or why we're starting to see what we're seeing.
Yeah, and how do we, like, really help support the change going forward? Because, like, as parents, we're always just trying to do the best we can, and it's kind of like diets anymore, like, they tell us one thing one day, and then they're like, "Oh, wait, that's gonna make you die." So, like, what do we do, right? Like, what do we do now that we are seeing 'cause everything, even in science, is like, you don't see the effects until years later, and especially in psychology, like,
Mhm.
in all of your background, how are you helping guide parents to, like, not corral, but, like, how do we move forward? Like, how do we shift this after all of this patterning and behavior has been, like, kind of, like, reinforced all this time?
Yeah, so I'm a huge advocate of authoritative parenting. So when you think about authoritative parenting, it's setting high expectations within the context of the warm and fuzzies. And I think what's going on is people are trying to take a softer approach to authoritative because what's happened is for millennials and Gen Xers, a lot of the time they were probably parented using more of like a militant parenting style, and they didn't feel seen, they didn't feel heard, they didn't feel understood. And so they're like, oh, we're never going to parent our kids like that. And so they're going to swing completely to the opposite end. And so then they're like, okay, we're going to do gentle parenting, we're going to focus in on their emotions, and we're going to make them feel validated and heard, and we're not going to make them do anything that they don't want to do, and all of these things, right? And I'm like, what is going on? Like, we go from here and then we swing all the way, the pendulum swings all the way over here. And we just skip this beautiful middle area called authoritative parenting that research has shown for literally decades the most positive developmental outcomes for kids. Kids who are parented use
Mm.
authoritative parenting style. They know right from wrong. They're good like members of society. They are independent, they're autonomous, they do well academically, they tend to get jobs and all this things. So I'm like, why are we swinging all the way over here? I mean, I know why, but like, let's
Mhm.
bring it back to this middle ground that tends to be, it doesn't tend, it is the best way to parent.
Yeah. And so like in that, after effect phase where yeah, their kids reaching out to them to like do all the things because they don't have the different coping skills or necessarily even life skills to really move through these different experiences. What's your like, best advice for them and even how to handle those conversations?
I think the big thing is you have to let them fail. And failure is this word
Mm.
that makes everyone kind of cringe, or most people cringe. I'm actually delivering a workshop on failure to a college baseball team on Thursday. And we need to embrace failure, we need to embrace mistakes, and we just need to let them figure it out all on their own. Like, they're probably not gonna die. They're probably, and so, like, that's the thing, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? If you just let your kids or your adult kid figure it out on their own and, like, have them, like, if they fall down, let them get back up. You don't need to, like, swarm them and do all the things for them. And so I think you just let them have experiences and you let them figure it out, however it is that they need to figure it out.
Mm. And that is hard to do when you're like, "Oh, but I've done it
Mhm.
all for the whole time." I have adult kids, so I get it, and it's a whole different relationship when you do have adult kids. It's like your role shifts so much, which that's a whole different conversation. So
Mhm.
circling back to the work that you're moving, more into in this season, which, I know that you're doing a lot of public speaking and you're great at helping
Mhm.
this next generation of leaders. And you're also, coming back to open your private practice. And so, what are the things that you hope come from all of this work that you're doing?
The biggest thing is I want adaptable individuals, individuals that can go into any environment that they are placed in, and they can assess the situation, and they can thrive, and they can do what they need to do in order to succeed in that environment. So I think that's one thing. Relationships. We are struggling as a nation with relationships, our marriages, our friendships, our parent to child relationships, our bosses to employee relationships. There's just basic relationship skills that we could all probably continually learn, and we would still learn better ways to have those relationships. And then the other thing is, like we've been already talking about it, Caroline. We talking about or not Caroline. Why did I just play Caroline? I apologize, Candace. Um,
It's all good.
talking about we've already been talking about parenting. And so, and I think by doing those three things, individual coping skills, relationship skills, and parenting skills, then I think what happens a lot of the time, then we're going to start to fortify what I call our fortify our families, and we're going to build our fortresses. And then by doing that, we're going to have stronger families, because I really do believe that if you want to change the world, it starts with your family. Because you can complain, and with everything going on in our nation right now, you don't have control over a lot of that, but you do have control over what is
Mhm.
going on in your four walls.
Oh my gosh, you just tapped on everything that I believe with everything within me. I say it
Mhm,
that, if we really truly want to see this world, literally starts within us and within our, I say our community, but that includes like our family, and our family is the starting point for that. And it can be I
mhm,
think one of the things that's when people are doing this kind of work of, like, looking at things, I feel like they're challenged by what they see. It's really hard to see where you may have, like, not lived up to something or done something a different way or could
mhm,
have done differently, and instead of, like, yeah, feel the things that you're feeling and experience it, but then figure it out, move through it. Like, allow yourself the space
mhm.
to see and recognize things, but you're not serving anything by just sitting in that. So I think that's one thing, but you said relationships, and especially, like, I think one of the most challenging things for higher leaders right now are the relationships teams, because of exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Like, not only are we way too accessible, let me just say that, way too accessible as human beings. Like, there's no boundaries there.
Mhm.
So we're dealing with that, but then the communication line. So, can leaders take what you're talking about and apply it within the workplace? Because I think, and this is going to be my
Mhm.
normal Candace question, where there's like 12 in the same one. But so, like, leaders are having to basically learn parenting skills, right? Because a lot of these younger leaders are just struggling,
Mhm.
but they also have to lead a business. So, how are they bridging that communication line in your work?
Yeah, so I think so when I talk about parenting, I talk about high expectations within the context of the warm and fuzzies. When I talk with like CEOs and COOs and those kind of like executives, I talk about high expectations, high support. And so I think it's if you're um, expecting if you're expecting your employees to have a certain level of life skills, you probably shouldn't, or communication skills, you probably shouldn't. And you might have to literally train them on exactly the kind of skills that you need them to have within your business. I remember when I was a college professor, I would in my syllabus and on syllabus day, I would always tell my students like, "Okay, when you email me, your email has to have 3 parts to it. It has to have an opening, so it has to say like, "Hey, Dr. Dre." It has to have a body with like appropriate like punctuation, and we're not putting it in all caps, and you're not sending me just a link, like you're actually telling me like what you want me to do with this link, and then you're gonna have a closing, like "Have a bright day" is mine, and then you're putting your name and those three things. And if you don't have those three things in your email, I'm simply going to write an email back that says like, "Hey, Candace, try again. See communication section in the syllabus. Have a wonderful day, Dr. Mata." And then I email it to them, and then they have to like try again. And so I think it's like those basic things where we might think that they are like everyone knows it, like it's common sense. It's not common sense anymore. And so
Mhm.
you're going to have to pour into them and you're going to have to teach them the things that you want them to do.
That's a good point because that's part of the leadership development side of our employees. And like, I can experience in working in, the different health industries and hiring, younger people. They really do need
Mhm,
that guidance. And so, yeah, while it might take a little bit more time, if you invest in your employees, then you're going to have that return on investment through their productivity. And I think it also helps them not be as stressed out because they're already anxious.
mhm,
And so why add another layer of that complexity? Why not just be like, okay, like I see you, let's figure this out. Here's some simple things. Give
mhm,
them the rules, the boundaries, all of that. And again, that
mhm,
starts with the leader. So if the leader can't hold that space for themselves, they're probably not going to be able to do that for their teams. Another conversation though.
mhm.
Um, so, in all of your work, how are you helping those that are super anxious really slow down that anxiety? Which I mean, of course, I know you work with them in sessions, but in general, what is some of the advice you can give on that?
Yeah, so usually I remember I was talking to someone who reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she's a nurse practitioner, like within mental health. And she was talking to me, and her and I were chatting, and I was like, oh yeah, like all my anxious clients, like they're gone in like 8 to 16 sessions, depending on how many like exposures we need to run them through. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, like 8 to 16 sessions. So like 2 to 4 months, like I have a client from the time that they start to the time that we're like, okay, you no longer meet criteria for anxiety, like an anxiety disorder. It's about 2 to 4 months. And she's like, that is amazing. And I'm like, well, you just do empirically supported treatments. And so it's like the first, and how I explained it to all of my clients is the first phase is I'm going to teach you all about it's like the psychology piece, it's the psychoeducation piece. We're going to teach you about what anxiety is and the impact that it has on your body and how it shows up. And so, kind of that psychoeducation piece. The second phase is we're going to teach you relaxation skills because one wonderful thing about our bodies is we can't be relaxed and anxious all at the same time. It doesn't work because of how our bodies are physiologically set up. And so, we're teach you relaxation skills. And then the third step is we're going to kind of teach you strategies to quiet all of the mind anxiety. So, all of that what if thinking, the catastrophizing, those kind of things. And then once we get through all of those 3 phases, we're gonna go into exposure, which some of them are like, "This is scary," and I'm
Mhm.
like, "I get it," because we're gonna create a list of all the situations that make you anxious, and then we're either going to have you do it in real life, we're gonna create it in my office, or we're going to have you, like, imagine it, like, sit there, we're gonna kind of bring it up, and we're gonna have you imagine it, and you're gonna tell it me over and over and over again and we're gonna do one of those, probably one of those a week, and then that's where it depends on 8 to 16. It depends on how anxious you are.
Right.
I've had some people who have, like, 4 exposures, and you have some that have, like, 30 like, literally 33 exposures. Um, and so that
Yeah.
for those, we might do, like, a few at a time because that would be crazy. But yeah, so that's how I walk people through in therapy and get them out of being anxious relatively quickly.
You were probably one of the first therapist that I've ever met that said that, which is really powerful because I just want to acknowledge that. Like, that is really powerful and empowering for the people who are coming in to see you. And as somebody who, dealt with anxiety for a long time,
Mhm,
I think it's the education piece that is really valuable because I think the more that we know about how we operate, how we function, the easier it is to not only be aware of it, but then move through it. So I love that you do all of that. Like, it's just, I just want to acknowledge that. Like, that's really big. Okay, so I know we're kind of coming to the end of our time. What is one thing you hope people really take away from today? And what are the things you're working on that people need to know about?
So, it's been interesting because like, the last, Like the last few days, there's been this kind of combination of like the sermon was talking about it and I've been talking about it and I was listening to a podcast this morning and it was all talking about it and it was talking about how like we have as a society we have gotten too focused on our emotions and our feelings and all of our feels, right? And now it's like I'm hearing more and more people talking about it where it's like you need to acknowledge those feels and then you need to like do it anyway. And I'm hearing like our pastor talked about it this weekend, and I was like, yes. And then, like I said, a podcast I was listening to was like, no, just you just like just okay, be courageous and go do it. Like you confidence, like if you're not confident, just go and be courageous and go and do it anyways. And I was like, yes. And that same person, her it's Layla or Hormozy, she in a different podcast, she was
Mm.
talking about all feelings are welcome, but not all behaviors are welcome. And I was like, yes. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge thing that I think our emotions, yes, acknowledge them, feel them, and then go do it anyways. Go do something about it. Those behaviors are the big thing. And then what I am excited, like what I want to promote, what I want people kind of, I think it's just with me start going back to having my own private practice. And one of my previous students, who's a sports psychologist, coming under kind of coming into the practice and working with me, we are going to be doing a lot more workshops. So that's probably what I'm so excited about with this new building that we're buying is that there's this big front part where we can host like workshops and people can like come and we're going to have like anxiety workshops and we're going to have sports psych workshops and we're also going to do like mom nights and dad nights and like date nights and like events where it's like okay, mom and kids or dad and kids, and just kind of creating this space where families can go back to like being families and really like investing in
Mm.
their relationships with their families.
Oh my gosh, I love all that because I think that's why we're seeing such a disconnect in our society is we have such fractured relationships within our home life. I know I work with so many clients that
Hmm.
that's like where a lot of their stuff comes from. So I can just imagine. And I think it's so cool that you have this space that's going to hold like incredible energy for all of the work. I love that you were talking about, it is one thing to experience and express emotion. Like obviously I talk about all the time, but it's like we have this like ability to move through it because, like I'm sure in your work you
Hmm.
recognize people can have the anxiety in the chest. The other day was that, sometimes that's a signal that it's a familiar pattern and you don't need to do it. And sometimes it's the unfamiliar
Right.
pattern. You're like, "Oh, I'm just really nervous. I
Hmm.
can't I can't see the end." And it's like once we just
Right.
decipher it and decide to do it anyway. Oh my gosh, I love this. Like that's why I love
Hmm.
having people like you on is because you just get it. And you're like, "Yeah, I don't
Hmm.
need to see somebody for a million years because then I'm, like, not really doing much for them." So, I can't wait to see all of the
Right.
workshops. Hopefully, I'll be able to come out and see one in person because
Hmm.
I love your work. I respect everything that you're doing. We met through the Outlier Project. So thankful for Scott.
Hmm.
Hashtag thanks.
Yep.
But, yeah, is there anything else you wanna share before we end?
No, I think other than you see my book back there, the number two parenting book, Practical Tips for the Pooped Out Parent. So it's all about setting those high expectations within the context of the warm and fuzzies. And it's practical parenting tips and the time it takes you to poop, a mom poop, not a dad poop, because those are significantly different times.
Yeah, they are. That's hilarious. I just love you. I don't know what else to say. But anyways, thank you so much for your time. I will make sure all of your information is in here. And if anybody wants to reach out, is LinkedIn the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, it is. It's the best way because it's the one that I'm
Okay.
probably the most active on.
Same. I get that. All right,
Thanks.
guys. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Andrea.